Hi, my name's Anthony Ward and welcome to this tutorial for 3D World magazine. Now this is the second part of a three-part series, and in the first part, if you followed that, what we basically did is we created the basic rig that you can see in front of you now. All we did was we went through the process of creating the joints for the spine and the limbs, and we added in IKFK functionality as well as stretchy limbs. So basically you can blend, you have an attribute up here to blend between IK and FK, control like so, and you've also got the option of having stretchy limbs as well. So what we're going to do is we are going to take this rig a step further. Like I say, it's quite basic at the moment. You'll notice that the mesh isn't attached to the skeleton. So what we did at the end of part one, I added an extra video onto there just explaining how you would then add in a few extra joints and work on the skin weights so that you could use this basic rig to then pose and animate your character. But for this video we're taking a step back, so we haven't got it skinned because at the end of this video, at the end of this part of the series, we won't be using these base joints to drive the mesh. We'll be using a new series of joints which we're going to create over the next few videos. So that's why the mesh is no longer attached, and we also don't have the extra joints which we created at the end of the last part at the shoulder and the elbow, which just helped us to be able to deform those areas correctly when it was moved around if you were skinning to these joints. So basically what we're going to do in this second part is we are going to take this basic skeleton and this basic rig that you can see here, and we're going to enhance it with some more sort of cartoon style controls. And what these are going to allow us to do is, at the moment, all we've got is that bend in the elbow. So we've got quite a rigid model. Yes, we've got the stretchiness in the limbs, but that's about all we can do. What we're going to do in over the course of the next few videos is add in the ability for you to deform the arm and create sort of an S shape, and as well as that there will be 3 extra controls in here which you can pull and move around, which you can then use to enhance your animation. So let's just jump in and get started. So what we're going to use is called a ribbon rig, and what this does is it uses a NURBS plane, and as the NURBS plane deforms, that deforms the joints, which are then skinned to the mesh. So that's basically it in a way. So we're using a model's deformation to deform another model. So let's just jump in and start creating. So what we need to do first is we are going to create a NURBS surface. So we're going to go to create NURBS primitive plane. Going to open up the options. So I'm just going to reset these because these are set to how it was before. So we want to set the axis to Z because we basically want the plane to face forward. And then we just want to change the width to 0.225 and the length to 0.05. Now these will depend on the units that you're using, so we'll see when I create it if I'm using the right units. Basically, if you're using a meter, then obviously the values will change compared to if you're working in centimeters. So the final thing we need to do is create how many patches we want in the NURBS surface. So this is how many divisions. So I'm going to create 8. Let's click apply. So that's worked okay. So we had the correct width and length values. If it comes in and it's too small or it's too big, then it doesn't matter. You can just scale it up and freeze the transforms. In fact, I'm just going to delete byte type history just to get rid of that off there. So as you can see, what we have now is a NURBS plane. And as I said in the first part of this series, it's good to rename things as you go. So I'm going to call that left arm ribbon. Now I'm going to bring that up in front of the, let's just switch to the front view, just to demonstrate why I added 8 patches. So if we move this up, we want it to match the length roughly of the skeleton joints. Now I know there's a bend in the elbow, but that doesn't matter for now. So we basically want an isopalm where we want joints to be placed. So we obviously want one at the shoulder, one at the wrist, one at the elbow, and we also want 3 divisions between each, so that we can just select where basically, let me just get rid of the joints, otherwise I'm just going to end up selecting that. Essentially we're going to deform this, using those joints, and that is going to allow us to get the shapes that we want. So yeah, the isopalms dictate how many divisions you want in there. Now if you want your skeleton just have 1 extra division in between the shoulder and the elbow, then obviously you'll need to change the amount of patches that you want between there. But for now, we just want 8, and we're happy with that. Ooh, that's better. So I'm just going to move this up just so we can see what we're doing. I'm just going to hide the model, hide the systems. We'll keep the skeleton. I'm just going to hide the controls as well, just so we can. We don't need a lot of clutter. So now we have the NURBS the NURBS surface. We need to find a way. Basically, what we want is joints along that surface, sort of where each of these isopalms are, and as the surface moves, the joints will follow that surface. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a hair system. Now it sounds a bit strange, but if you just stick with me. So we're going to select the NURBS surface, and we're going to go to nHair, create hair. Just open the options. I'm just going to reset those settings again. So we want to set the U count to 9. So 1 more than we did with the patches. V count to 1, because we don't want any, we just want 1. Basically this is going to create follicles, so we're dictating how many follicles we want. So we want 9 follicles going across, but we only want 1 strip, so we only need to set the U count to 1. We want to set edge bounded. We want to enable that because we want the follicles to be created on each isopalm or edge. And I'm going to set that to static because obviously we don't want these to be dynamic. We're just after the follicles really. So I'm just going to click apply. Now it's come through quite small, but if I zoom in, you can just make out these little nodes here. And these are the follicles. These are what we need. I'll just see if I can make them a little bit bigger, just for demonstration purposes. If I just scale that one up. No. Okay. So basically you can just see them there. And they're all we need. So we can get rid of that hair system, and we can go through and delete all these curves underneath all of these. We can also get rid of this paint effects node and the nucleus. Like I said, all we are after are those follicles. So while we're here, again, let's just go back and rename everything. So I'm just going to select all those, come up here to where we can rename, and I'm just going to call it left arm follicle. If I press return, see it's renamed all these with nice numbers afterwards. I'll rename the group that they're in to left arm follicles. So they're all set up. So now we need the joints, and these are going to be the joints which are going to drive the geometry. So I'm just going to create skeleton, create joints, and I'm just going to create a joint anywhere. Just bring it up here, snap it to this shoulder joint, and move that over. So we want this joint to be the same orientation as the shoulder joint. If I make sure that's set to object, so we're working in object space, so you can see how we need Y facing forward, Z pointing down, and X pointing to the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate this. So let's have a look. So holding J will snap it. If it's difficult to see, what we can do is go display, transform, display, local rotation axes, just so we can see then. So I'm holding J just to snap that so we get precise position. Let's have a look. So that's about right. But now I'm just going to get rid of that rotation value. So what we want is we don't want translate or scale to be frozen, and we don't want the joint orient to be frozen because that will just reset it back to how it was before. Click apply, and see we've got nice 0 rotations there. So I'm going to call this left arm bind 1. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to move it underneath that first follicle, and then I'm going to 0 out the transforms, and that will just move it up to where that follicle is. Now the joint's a bit small, so I'm just going to increase the radius just so it makes it a bit more visible. So what I'm going to do is I need to create another 8 of those, and then I'm just going to drag those under the other follicles. Six, 5, 4, 3, 2. And then I'm just going to select those joints and 0 out the translations again. And there you can see we've got the joints underneath each follicle, and they're all exactly on the where the isoparms are. So I'm just going to disable joint selection up here just to demonstrate. If I select these control vertices and move them up, we can see these joints are turning to orient with the surface of the, well, with the NURB surface, and they're pointing up to this joint here, which is just where we're moving the control vertices. So you can see now we can deform this model, and then we can, as we're deforming it, the joints are following. So I hope you're sort of getting the idea of where we're going here. We're basically going to deform the surface, and then that in turn is going to change the orientations and the translations of the joints, and that will then drive our main model. So one more step we're going to do to the actual NURB surface is basically when we come to animate this, we want, because we're working on an arm, we have a shoulder, an elbow and a wrist joint. So when we bend the elbow, we want to have a nice crease in the middle. We don't want it to sort of create sort of basically a curve where the elbow is. We want sort of a nicer crease. And this will come later when we adjust the weighting values. But for now, what we do need is we need a couple of extra isoparms. So I'm just going to right click, select isoparm, select and just drag to one side of this central isoparm here, sort of where the elbow joint is going to be. And then I'm just going to go to surfaces. There should be insert isoparms. So that's inserted that one there. And then I'm going to do the same at the other side. Insert isopart. So if we look at the control vertices now, we have these extra ones here, and that's just going to allow us a little bit more control when we come to paint the weights later on. So we have the main NURB surface. We also have the joints that are going to follow the way that that surface deforms. Now before we move on, I'm just going to move this a bit further down, closer to the arm. We're just going to create a couple of duplicates of those, of the main NURB surface. I'm just going to move those up so we can see them. And then I'm going to call one left arm sign and one left arm twist. And what these two are going to allow us to do is create a more uniform deformation of the main NURB surface using Mayer's own deformers. And to do that, we can just create a blend shape from these two onto the main NURB surface. So if I select the new ones, the twist and the sign, select the main one, and we're going to go to deform blend shape, and we're just going to call it left arm B shape, just so we know what that node is. Click create. So now we have the ability to blend the shape of this between these two here. But we're going to come back to that. We've created these duplicates now because we're going to change the shape of this. So it's going to end up with a slight bend in the arm. So it's good to just duplicate those now so we've got them to save for later. So I'm just going to hide them for now. So with that done, we're pretty much ready to start making this arm our control arm. You know, you remember we created that in part one, and we're going to be moving that around. So that control arm is going to drive this NURB surface, and then that NURB surface is going to drive these joints, and then those joints are going to be the bind joints which we connect to the actual geometry. So how do we get this to control this? Well, we could just skin this directly to this, and that would be fine, but we need a bit more control over it. We also need some controls sort of part way through in the middle sections of the upper arm and the lower arm as well. So let's create a few control joints now, and these joints are going to be the main joints that control the actual NURB surface. So we know that we want a control at the beginning. We want one halfway up the arm. We don't need to create a control joint for every joint here. So then we want one at the elbow, one in the middle of the upper arm, and then one at the wrist. So I'm just going to duplicate them, and I'm just going to move them out of that group. So there we have those control joints, and I'm just going to rename these. So go to the first one, left arm root, left arm upper, left arm middle, just indicating sort of the positions of where they are, lower, and left arm end. So we know that's at the root of the arm, that's in the middle, and that's at the end. And we've also got our extra upper and lower joints. So we're now going to create 5 groups following the same naming conventions as these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll call these with the we'll basically rename these with offset afterwards. Just creating our offset groups. Now we haven't grouped these joints directly, because what we're going to do is we're going to we need to change the position and the orientation of these offset groups. If we do that when we've got the joints grouped underneath them, then this group is at the world root. That will move up here, and in turn the joint will move up here. So we need to do that. We need to parent the joints after we've adjusted the positions and the orientations of these offset groups. Like so. And then in addition to this, we're going to create two extra groups, copying the upper and the lower, and we're going to call those aim. And you'll see what we need these for later on. And then we're going to parent those back to the groups that we duplicated. So you can see end, lower, and then underneath the lower we've got an aim group, middle, the upper group with the aim group underneath that, and then the root. So now we just need to make sure these are positioned and orientated exactly where we need them. So we're just going to use the same trick as we did in part 1 and just use parent constraints. Make sure maintain offset is off, because the whole idea is we don't want to maintain the offset, we want it to snap. Add, lower, add, middle, upper. Now I'm just pressing G just to repeat the last operation I did. So you can see they've all inherited, they've got the correct orientations, the correct rotations. So let's just go through and delete the constraints like so. And then now we've got the offset groups in exactly the right position and orientated correctly. We can then just drag the joints. So we're putting the joint under the aim groups. So we want them under the lowest child of the group. Upper aim. There we go. So they're all sat nicely under those groups. Just going to close this down just to make some room. And just move those up, just so they're all the NURB surfaces are at the same place. Whoops. So there we have our control joints and we have our main groups. So with those done, the next step is we're just going to add a few controls in there. But what I'm going to do is we're running up to sort of past the 20-minute mark now, so it's probably a good time for us to just take a quick break, and I'll just catch things up in the next video. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you have any questions and tell me what future videos you would like to see. And why not say thanks and also earn exclusive rewards with a small donation via my Ko-fi page. As always, remember to like this tutorial and subscribe to my channel, and remember to hit that bell icon so you're kept up to date with notifications on future videos and posts. This is Ant CGI signing off, and I will see you on the next one.